Marvel Avengers is an action-adventure, multiplayer, looter brawler that is now, sadly, coming to an end. And after playing this game on and off since launch, I'm not surprised in the slightest, but definitely disappointed. If you played this game, then you'll know that the developers were trying to improve this game, but poorly planned roadmaps and a weak foundation eventually caught up to a game that should have been great, but fell through on the premise of promises and what could have been. What exactly made this game bad? Well, Marvel Avengers was a commercial success, easily becoming one of Square Enix's best-selling digital games ever, only coming in second place next to Final Fantasy VII Remake. But even with impressive sales, the game suffered from middle-of-the-road, lukewarm reviews. While Avengers as a game was such a strong premise, a multiplayer live service game in which you control your favorite heroes from the Marvel Universe, when playing the game you soon realize that's all the game was. The Avengers game is fun, don't get me wrong, I love this game so much, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't say this is one of the most repetitive AAA games out there. As it stands, there are a total of 11 characters in the game, 12 if you have a PlayStation, perks of being a Sony fan I guess. But besides small movement options and the specifics of skills, they all pretty much play exactly the same. If it doesn't seem like it, then you've probably been focusing on the visuals, which are great and look amazing. The Hulk looks powerful and attacks with ruthless indiscrimination, Black Widow looks like a well-executed beast, and Ms. Marvel looks as stretchy as ever. The problem is, at the game's core, there's no depth to any of the characters past their unique skills, and this is especially true for the clone characters. And yes, this game has clone characters, and yes, I'm going to talk about it. While this game does offer solutions to fix these problems such as gears and an expansive skill tree, it feels more like getting a fresh pair of Yeezys when you can't pay rent. The skills, while fun, do offer a nice difference between the characters, so don't get me wrong, but unfortunately the skill trees don't. It's supposed to feel like each player's hero is supposed to be different from another, but it never felt that way. A Thor player will always be a Thor player and feel and play just like every other Thor player. A Hulk player, just like every other Hulk player. Which would have been more than fine had the game not advertised itself otherwise. And this is on top of a gear system that didn't even help that. You see, this game wants you to find a gear set and stick with it and nurture it, but that just never happens. At lower levels, you have to constantly switch gear sets to find better sets. It's the only way you can do it, and you end up just switching gears in the middle of a level, completely ruining the pacing of the gameplay. And when you get into the late game, you run into the exact opposite problem. Max level gear is rarely ever worth switching into another piece because of the amount of resources it took to max out the latest gear. The side buffs and effects are barely ever noticeable unless a piece of gear is offering a buff to a specific ability that you just happen to like. So even if a piece of gear can be slightly stronger than the one you're currently wearing, it's usually not worth building. If you played this game, chances are you only ever switched if you found a piece to offer the tiniest of stat buffs if you care about min-maxing. But if you don't, chances are you didn't. And that's all ignoring the repetitive combat that this game suffers from. In Avengers, each hero visually looks striking and powerful. Black Panther being an extreme highlight of the game for me. I cared nothing for this character at all, but something about his animations and fighting just spoke to me in this game. But with that being said, just like with any other character, it pretty much results into the same exact button combo presses, the same offensive skills being used when encountering an elite enemy, and then rinse and repeat. Each character suffers from the same repetitive gameplay format so much that they even made it so every character has a range ability in the game. And while that does make sense for most characters and helps in single player, why does every character need a range option? I get the practicality of it, but in terms of making characters feel unique, it's just another way of making them feel exactly the same. If they wanted to make heroes feel unique, give us puzzles that can only be solved by certain heroes, targets that can only be reached by certain enemies, hell man, enemies that can only be exploited by certain heroes. There's no major upsides to who you pick and no downsides either, leaving everyone to just feel like a mess of combos and abilities. everyone feels the same. Another big issue this game has is its movement. Movement for characters like Thor and Iron Man feel great, and flying around controls just fine. Air-to-air combat also feels awesome and is definitely a highlight for the movement. But if you're stuck on the ground, sucks to be you, idiot! It's not like the movement is bad in this game. When it wants to work, it controls quite well actually. But just like a lot of aspects in this game, it really feels unpolished. Sometimes you can't attach to things you clearly should have been able to. Sometimes you hit a wall at a wrong angle and just fail your wall run. Things like that happen in this game. Not to mention that jumping around is quicker than just moving regularly because your run is actually not that fast at all. But despite all that, this game can still be fun. Especially when you get a squad of friends to just rush down some villains and you get to just enjoy how mindless the combat can be. Because all the buttons feel the same and every character plays the same, you could pretty much play whoever you want and have a good time. And if the multiplayer is not for you, then maybe the story can be. Arguably one of the best parts about the game, the single player campaign tells a story about a world that lost the Avengers, and it's pretty much up to Ms. Marvel to reunite them and save the world from an evil corporation called AIM. This story is fantastic, and is still one of the best interpretations of Ms. Marvel to date. If you're unfamiliar with the character, just know this. It's rare for writers to nail her this way, and oftentimes her stories don't mean anything or it fails to capture the essence of her. And in that same way, Avengers does that for almost every main hero, showing their struggles and having them grow beyond their established roles. You even get really good moments that are just so rare to see, whether it's in the comics or the MCU.
What is your name?
Oh, Kamala Khan.
Uh-huh. And what is that thing you are holding?
Oh, it's a high-density muon beam. A Model 3 repulsor club. It's Tony Stark's first love.
Odin's beard. About as intimidating as the man himself, hmm?
Oh, you're funny.
Yes, I am.
But this game wasn't designed to be a true single-player experience. At the end of the day, it's supposed to be a multiplayer live service game. Which brings me to arguably the part that really made this game bad. The updates. I will never knock a company for trying, but with that being said, Crystal Dynamics tried to do so much with this game that eventually, nothing they did was ever worth the hype. When having a game called Avengers, and you're thinking about your dream team of heroes who you'd want to be in the game, who are you picturing? Are you picturing Doctor Strange? The Sorcerer Supreme that could cast a variety of spells, truly switching up the gameplay that's already getting kinda stagnant? Or how about Captain Marvel? A high-flying hero with lasers and a binary mode that practically turns her into a Super Saiyan? Or did you picture Kate Bishop? Yeah man, this cast choice is weird. I have nothing against the characters they picked for this game, honestly. I think in a perfect world, if this game was super successful, I would have still liked to see all these characters eventually. But the problem is, when you have over 60 years of Avenger comic staples and a decade of MCU casting to pull inspiration from, why did they pick the easiest characters to implement? I say easiest because right after Kate Bishop, we got Hawkeye, a character whose arrival was ruined because of how similar he was to the character who came before him. Afterwards, I'll give credit where credit's due in saying that we did get a nice change of pace with Black Panther and Spider-Man, two characters that feel and work vastly different from the rest of the cast. But then we get the mighty Thor, who plays just like, you guessed it, just like Thor. And who's the final character we get? The Winter Soldier, who plays just like a gun-wielding Captain America. If you think I'm being too hard on this game, or I'm just a Marvel fanboy upset I didn't get a drop-kicking She-Hulk, Bucky literally uses the same character model as Steve, allowing him to move Thor's hammer just like Cap does. Tell me they didn't take the easy route when making the characters? I'm waiting. And the update problems didn't even stop there. They made a promise to revamp and improve the movement system that just never happened. Spider-Man was promised at launch but didn't get released until much later after the game's released. The first true raid for the game came in the first major expansion, which was released almost a year after launch, which is crazy for a game that's all about gear. This game was filled with updates that never came or came far way too late into this game's lifecycle. Avengers was never able to meet its own ambition, and most of the people who played this game could tell. Every time I decided to get back into this game, something was changed for practically no reason. Gear power changed, resources gain changed. Were these good changes? Most of the time, yeah. But when it was as often as it was in Avengers, it seems like the developers themselves were always playing catch up and didn't know what to do. Even if you were like me and enjoyed the combat, loved the story, and could look past all this game's flaws, the game barely had any form of staying power. Because gear is barely ever worth truly grinding for, why would you ever do any mission outside of a quest if you're max level? Min-maxing stats that don't matter, grinding out a new hero who plays just like another one, I could understand how for most people it just never felt worth it. Marvel Avengers is sadly coming to an end, and after dedicating so many hours into this game and playing it for years, I hate to see it go. But repetitive gameplay, questionable updates, and broken promises ruined what could have been an otherwise phenomenal game. With one of the most memorable stories in a Marvel video game, a concept that was super strong, and gameplay elements that did work and felt great at times, it's a shame that now the Avengers are officially gone for good. Enjoy the rest of your day, and take care.